I don't know what the deal was with turbans and Renaissance composers, but there it is. So we're talking about Josquin Desprez, the greatest composer of the High Renaissance. He's Flemish, Belgian, Low Countries, French, born in Hainaut, which is part of the French-speaking section of Belgium. He may have been actually born just over the border in France proper. In any case, he was pretty much considered French, but doesn't stay there, certainly for his whole life, far from it. Was a choir boy in France, studied probably under that ugly dude, Johannes Ockeghem, first composer ever depicted with glasses. Josquin admired him enough that, of course, he wrote the Déploration sur la mort d'Ockeghem, the deploration, the lamentation on the death of Ockeghem. One of Josquin's early motets is somehow connected with Louis the XI of France, whose army later wound up killing the entire population of the town of Condé, including his aunt and uncle. The people were corralled into a church and burned alive. Unbelievable. Josquin went back to the homeland at this point, claiming their inheritance. He had been designated their heir. This is not the only French King Louis who's going to have an effect on Josquin's life. Oh no. Eventually he migrates to Italy, because that's where the money is. Well, a lot of the money. Works for the powerful Sforza family, who ran the Duchy of Milan. That's up in the northern part. The Milan Cathedral had already been built by this point, of course, and the foothills of the Alps were ever present, but the La Scala Opera House and that brilliant skyline were far in the future. Eventually he migrated down to Rome and worked in the Sistine Chapel, that being named after Pope Sixtus VI. Isn't that redundant? Here, as depicted by Titian. We're talking high Renaissance here, by the way, including Michelangelo, Leonardo, Raphael, and all those other Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Donatello is a slightly earlier artist. The famous ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, painted by Michelangelo, was not there yet. That was done between 1508 and 1512, and Josquin was in the employ in the late 1400s. What was there in the Sistine Chapel was a tradition of the choristers carving their names in the wall of the church, and indeed Josquin's name evidently survives in the wall, and it's the only known signature we have of the guy. From there he briefly went back to work for the Sforzas again, and that's where Scaramella was composed, along with El Grillo and In Te Domine Speravi, which are his only three frottala. The frottala is often considered the predecessor of the madrigal, although some type of piece called the madrigal extends all the way back into the late medieval period. And we've done that spin of the madrigals went from serious to silly, and the motets went the other direction, from silly to serious, over the border between the medieval and Renaissance periods. So here he is, at the height of his turbaned power, in Scaramella, roughly 1498. I've always thought it was 1500, but evidently not so. By 1500, the next Louis, specifically the 12th, had run rampage through northern Italy and imprisoned the Sforzas, so Josquin was out of there. Matter of fact, he was back in the employ, maybe, of this guy. So in both cases, the nemeses, Louis, were also the employers at times. Go figure. So the piece is evidently in the genre of the clownish soldier. The text, Scaramella va alla guerra con la lancia e la rotella, lo zombaro bombetta lo zombaro, and that's basically Scaramella's going off to war with a lance and a buckler, and then that's basically kind of sis boom ba whoop-de-doo. Scaramella fa la gala con la scarpa e la stivala. Scaramella's out on a spree with boot and shoe. One critic online notes the phallic potentials of the lance, and this happens to be written by Timothy Dickey. So here we go. It may have been written in 1498, but published in 1501. I've split the difference all these years and said 1500. 3/4 time signature, note values, quarter notes, half notes, dotted quarters, eighths. Fair amount of syncopation, including hemiola, threes against twos. No indication of tempo, but it's a lighthearted song. Most people perform pretty fast. Mode, scale, what's going on here? 4-part a cappella harmony. We've got vocal parts that seem to be recognizable. Working up bosses, we know that, bass, tenor, alto, just like today. And superius, well, we know those sopranos have those superiority complexes, don't we? As to the mode, well, we're in the Renaissance. Ambiguity reigns, right? And we've got, seems like the bass could be in D Dorian. We're starting out do, re, me, te, te. But notice the superius is a third, minor third above that. And sure sounds like F Lydian there, doesn't it? Do, re, mi, re, ti. But check this out. The tenor part is, when it comes in at a contrapuntally 2-measure delay, it is a perfect fifth. It looks like it's a perfect fifth up, but that's the tenor part. Remember, it sounds, see that little 8 under the treble clef? It will sound an octave below. So instead of sounding a fifth up, it's actually a fourth down. And so here, we could be in C major, but let's just keep it in an F mode now. So that would be Sol, La, Ti, 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 La, Fi. So we're all over the map. Oh, and that is a terribly big deal here, to my knowledge, and that's only my poor knowledge, but that is the first example that I can cite of imitative counterpoint at the fifth rather than at unisons and octaves, which were de rigueur in the medieval period. So there you have it. Wa-do. The Andrea Gabrieli Ricercare, all those Bach fugues couldn't have happened without counterpoint at the fifth and fourth. Simply said, counterpoint at the fifth or at simply other pitch levels gives increasing flexibility, mobility. And by the time we cadence, we are in none of the above. We even have musica ficta, which is a carryover from late Middle Ages, right? We had that in Machaut, etc. And we are clearly cadencing in our friend A harmonic minor. And you see that G sharp. And we neglected the alto voice. Notice it's in contrary motion to the other 3 parts. And apparently it looks like D Dorian too at the beginning because it's do, la, so, etc. Second page, well, after all that hullabaloo, it's imitative counterpoint at the unison and octave. Do, re, mi, do, re, mi, do, re, mi. So maybe we've just gone so far afield that it's time to go back to more tradition. Or, shall we say, since we've cadenced in A, is that actually lay, te, do, do? Ooh, that would be the Stairway to Heaven climb. Wa-do. Do, ti, do. Well, how about that? That's the soprano part, at least in my more tenorish, basso, not so profundo voice. But you recall, first guess, best guess, we noted that the bass line at the beginning was in D Dorian, and we are ending up in D harmonic Dorian. So if it really is conceived in D Dorian, that would make the mid cadence in A, and that's the dominant. That's moving towards common practice harmony. This is still enough of a post-medieval piece that, notice, it's the tenor at the end that actually has the lowest note, because that's going to sound an octave below, so it's going to be down there under the bass part. And so you've got re, do, which is that Machaut cadence, and the bass jumping up an octave, so. And of course, as you see with that bass and tenor, you have voice crossings all over the place, which is very medieval, and I guess early Renaissance at least. Well, it's Renaissance too, but that's going to go away by the time we get to the Baroque, definitely. The alto just holding on the so, and we even have a power chord at the end. There's no third. So much for Josquin being an advanced harmonic composer. Well, he's traditional in some ways. We've talked earlier in the semester about all the other innovations, his mensural canons and all the delights of El Grillo, etc. So I think we're good to go. And now, more performances of Scaramella than you can shake a weapon at. The first one is our featured from the YouTube link on the blog, and it actually starts with Josquin, but directly segues to a close contemporary compatriot, and that would be Loisette Compere. And watch us do an ABA of turbans. Oh, and lest we say that nobody spells Josquin Desprez the way I do, observez-vous these two record jackets. So there. And of course, most of the recordings with male sopranos and altos. Scaramella,
alla guerra con la lancia rolla, lo zombero, lo zombero, scala, 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 galla, galla, scala, scala, stiva, lo zombero, lo zombero.